Okay, so here is the condensing unit, and our next step would be to take this apart and take it outside to clean it, but it's just been awful weather on the Northeast there with freezing temperatures in the teens and below zero, and it's just, there's no way I can get it outside to wash it down. But we're going to take it apart. We're going to remove the compressor, take the condenser fan motor out, and tomorrow the weather's supposed to be a little warmer. So we'll take it outside, we'll wash it down, and probably repaint this. Maybe I'll stick it in the sandblaster and clean it up a little bit. We'll see what it looks like after it's washed. And then we'll proceed with the process. First thing I'm going to do is take off this blade. Oh, it's kind of stuck. What do you expect? 35 years. Okay. Now, and we're going to take out the condenser fan motor. Move these 4 screws in there. Let me get a light. Okay. This motor's been replaced before, probably by me, many years ago. As I can see, it's been wired in right here. Of course, these come out of the relay box here, connected to the compressor, so whenever the compressor runs, the fan motor runs. Let me get a tool to take off that. Okay, what do we got? So these bushings right here are all hard. These two here are the brass inserts in here. So we're going to replace those with rubber bushings. And next we're going to take out the compressor. Alright, so now we'll just unsweat these line, the high side line right there, and we should be able to pull this right out. right up against the chassis there, so I'm going to move this out a little bit. Like that. And then we should be able to pop that out. Okay, that's out, and everything else should be disconnected. Let me put on a pair of gloves here so we don't burn our fingers. All right, this is the process port, which is soldered to the low side. This is the suction line that comes out and gets hooked up to the heat exchanger. So I'm going to leave these here for now, and when we get our new compressor, we'll make sure where the lines are. I'm probably going to use an Embraco compressor as opposed to a Tecumseh, but I don't know yet. I'm going to look up the specs and make sure we have the right BTU rating and type of compressor. Okay, now this chassis is ready to be taken outside and cleaned up really well. So we'll probably do that tomorrow. It's expected to be a little warmer tomorrow. We'll be able to turn on our water and turn on our hose. Okay, so we'll be back. We finally got a day here on the East Coast where it's not below freezing. Get a chance to wash this machine down so we can start to put it together. I'm using a citrus cleaner on here. It's antibacterial. You can buy it in like 3 or 5 gallon containers on the internet or at places like Home Depot, Lowe's. It's called ZEP, Z-E-P. You'll notice I plugged all the lines up with the rubber plugs so we don't get any water in there. Okay, I'm going to finish cleaning this up and then we'll do the condensing unit. Alright, so this is undiluted cleaner. It's right out of the bottle, straight, very strong. Okay, let's finish this up and come back. Okay, that should do it. We'll clean up here and then bring these units back inside and blow dry them, get all the moisture off, and we'll start to reassemble. Okay, so we're going to take this rear cover, which goes over here, and this condenser fan motor bracket, and we're going to throw this into the sandblaster and clean it up a little bit and repaint it. We're going to sandblast these parts and clean them up a little bit so we can repaint them. Okay, here is the base. We painted it last night, put it in the sandblasting cabinet and cleaned it up a little bit, got rid of the rust. So it's all painted. We put some Pour 15 paint down here, which is moisture resistant, moisture proof on the sides. Of course, this is sometimes can collect water. And then on the outside, we just used flat black on it. So that's done now. The next step is to, we're going to take the condenser and clean it up a little bit and put that back in, and then put the compressor in and start putting this thing back together. All right, that's it for now. Okay, here we have the condenser all disassembled, and we're going to clean it up a little bit more before we put it in. And first, we're going to replace this foam. It's all hardened and dried out. You can see it just crumbled to pieces here. So I found this foam insulation. This is a 3/8 times with a 3/8 wall, and the insulation that Sub-Zero uses is 3/8 by 1/4 inch wall, and I just couldn't find it anywhere. So this should suffice. We'll just put a piece of this in here, and then a piece across the top, and that'll keep the air directed through the condenser. So let's get this cleaned up. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here is cut. You don't even have to cut these things, they're so dried out. Look at that. Huh. Okay, we'll pull out these pieces of foam. Look at that. That's the original one. And then we'll just wash this up a little bit before we put the new foam on it. But I want to take this fin comb in here and straighten out some of these fins. Okay, so now we will clean it up. So I put 2 new pieces of foam on the sides. It's nice and soft. New cable ties here to hold it in, and this piece here will go on the top when I put the machine back together. And what that does is it forces the air from the condenser fan motor to be pulled through the condenser and not around it, so it helps keep it cool. I cleaned this up a little bit, washed it down with some citrus cleaner, and now I'm going to put this back into the condenser base along with the bracket, the shroud. Okay. So we remounted the condenser and the shroud. Our insulation pieces are in here. When we put the top back on, that'll flatten out and that'll seal that all off. We've got our little bushings in here to keep vibrations. And the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to put some new bushings on the condenser fan motor bracket right here, and then put a new condenser motor in there, and then we'll put the compressor on. So here's our new condenser fan motor. We put new bushings in, rubber bushings in, because the other ones were hard and probably vibrate and make noise. So now we're going to put the condenser fan motor in. Okay, so our condenser fan motor is installed. We hooked up our ground wire in there. Everything looks pretty good. So now this gets tied into the compressor. So then, and we also put a clamp down here to hold down this high side line here so it doesn't vibrate. So everything looks pretty good. We're going to put the compressor in next. Okay, so we are using Embraco 1/5 horsepower compressor. This is going to replace the Tecumseh. It's pretty close BTU rating. So we're just going to double check and see where our lines are. Let's see if we have to do any. As I said, I think I previously stated that the Embraco compressors are, I think, my opinion, better than the Tecumsehs because they're quieter. Okay, we got new rubber bushings here for the compressor. So here's process port, suction line, discharge line. And the lines are in pretty much the same space or same spot. So what we'll do is we'll unsweat this suction line and the process line. This is the process port which goes to the front of the condensing unit so you can check the pressure from the front of the machine. So we'll get this all prepped up and unsweat those lines and swap over the electrical wiring, and then we'll sweat everything in. Okay, so we ran into a little snag here. So even after 56 years of experience, you still think you know everything. I have a problem here. This Embraco compressor is too big. It's too tall, and I'm going to show you why. When we put the cabinet back on here, you see, that's hitting the compressor. Look at this. You see that? If we were to put that cabinet back on here, it would push the compressor down and it would cause a vibration and be noisy. And we don't want that, of course. So what I had to do was I ordered a Danfoss compressor, which is 7 1/4 inches high. This is 8 inches, and that'll give us enough room. So you have to be careful with the Sub-Zero. The under-the-counter units use this smaller Tecumseh compressor, which is here, and it's not as tall as the Embraco. But these are not available anymore, these AE 1360s. So we'll have to wait until the new compressor comes in before we can finish up this job. But just FYI, this compressor is the original compressor. It's 35 years old, and it still runs. It's still working. She just said she wanted to rebuild it, so we're doing what she requested. But that compressor is still good. Anyway, we'll be back as soon as we get the new compressor. And then, as you can see here, we got it all painted up, and it's looking pretty good. So we will move on. Okay. Okay. While we're waiting for the compressor to come in, I painted the cabinet. I sealed all the openings, took all the putty off. I still have to do the front, but I just wanted to show you. I pulled out this drain hose, and it's 35 years old. Look, it's just so brittle. So I have a new piece of drain hose here, and we're going to put that on. We'll cut it the same size. It goes in through this hole. This little thing sticking up here, that's the drain heater. And there's a P-clamp inside that holds this in place. So we want to get that started on that nipple. And then we'll clamp that down. And then we'll cut it to size. And that's basically it. But it's coming along pretty well. Here's the unit here. You probably saw this already. It's all painted up, ready to go. I'm just waiting for the compressor to come in, and so we'll get that done. And also I've gotten some more parts in here. This is the evaporator fan motor. It's a common one. It's got a lot of parts in there. That's why it's in a big box. It's fits all the evaporator fan motors for Sub-Zero on the refrigerator. The freezer is a different number. It's an 0160. This is the thermostat for the ice maker, and this is the water valve. So we got all those parts to put in there. Okay, we'll be back. Okay, let's see if you can see this, because I got this thing lying down on this side. I'm putting the drain hose in there, and you can see there's a little P-clamp. There's a P-clamp right here that I've loosened, and you can see part of the drain hose that I'm twisting here into position, and it's not easy, but we're getting it in. And then see if we have enough material. Hold on, let me take this camera off here, so maybe you can see better that way. Let's see, clamp right here. So it looks like we can go up a little bit more. I want to try to get that in there some more. Okay, there it goes. I'm just twisting it. Okay, that should be enough. We'll get that clamp attached and screw it into this little hole here, and that will complete the drain hose. This back on here. This is going to go in like this, and then we'll put some more of this putty, sealing putty on here. This is Flex, waterproof rubber. It's a little it's not really hard. It's a little pliable, but it works pretty good on these gaps. So we'll finish clamping that on. We'll put some sealer around the hose, and we're still waiting for the compressor to come in, and then we'll clean up the front here and do some more painting. But you can see I painted the sides, and I painted the back. So this is the drain heater. There's a drain heater in there. You can see it there. It's attached to the trough. All right, that should be it for now. Okay, the compressor finally came in. Here's the part number, 7014067. This is the right compressor for this condensing unit. It's a low body compressor. And right now, with this supply shortage, the only place you can get it is right from Sub-Zero. So we're just going to pull it out of the box and make sure it's the right one. Of course it is, but and normally I buy my compressors in bulk from a local supplier, but no one had this compressor in stock, so I had to wind up paying a lot more for it. As you can see, it comes with the process port, the starter, rubber mounts, filter dryer, and here it is. Here's the compressor we're looking for. This is called a low body. It's a low dome, as opposed to the other compressors that we normally use, which is our Bracos. And as you can see, the height, here's the old one right here. This is actually even smaller than the original compressor. So we should have no problem getting this in here. And it mounts this way, so the discharge and suction line and the process ports are a little different on here, but close enough. So we're going to unsweat these tubes. This is your discharge, this is your suction line, this is your process port, and we'll adapt those to here. But as you can see, this is going to go right in. It's going to be plenty of room. So let's get this ready. Okay, so now we have the new compressor mounted. It's not clamped down yet, but I put the starter and the overload on, as you can see here, and these wires. This is for the condenser fan motor, which will get tied into here. This plugs into here, like that, and the ground wire. Now, what we're going to have to do is the discharge line, which is right here. This is a 1/4 inch. This is a 1/4 inch, so we're going to have to either get a union to go in there, or we're going to have to swag this out to get that over there. So that fits like that. This is the process port, and this is the suction line, but this is a low side dome, so you can use this either way. And on the old compressor, this was in like this. This was the suction line, because it came out over here and it connects to the cabinet, the evaporator coil. And this is the process tube, which we will connect to here and then run it out through the front, because that's where it was before. It was able to access the sealed system from the front without having to pull out. I'm not sure if that's really necessary. We could just put they gave us a process port here, and we can just put this process port on right here, bend it and put it out so it's sticking out here, and hook the suction line to come out this way. That's probably what we're going to wind up doing, because I don't think, in all the years that I've been servicing these units, I very rarely used that process port, because most of the time we did seal system work, we had to get to the high side too, which means we had to pull out the machine. And they weren't really that difficult to pull out. So the next step will be to get our joints ready to be sweated, and we'll go from there. By the way, this compressor, this is an EM65NR. Usually the numbers indicate the BTUs, so this is 650 BTUs, same as the old compressor. And there's a little bracket on top of this compressor, because on some units, not on Sub-Zeros, but on some other makes, they used to bolt the drain pan on top of the compressor. So
please charge it in time.
That's that. Okay, so here, what we're going to do here is we're going to swag out this discharge line, high side line, with a 1/4 inch, so we can just sweat that right in there. And the reason why I'm putting this swagging block on here is
charge it in time.
Okay, here we are. We're going to swag out the suction line. We already swagged out the discharge line, the 1/4 inch swag. The reason why I'm putting this swag block on here is to prevent that tubing from bending, because I've seen that happen. And also on the process port, we've decided to just use the process port that came with the package. And we'll remove the Schrader valve. We'll sweat this in instead of running the process line all the way up to the front, because I never use that anyway. So this is a 5/16 swag, and we're just going to swag this out so we can sweat. And just go very easy on here. Don't try to do it all in one bang. Just little by little. Otherwise you could bend it. Okay, we got that. There you go. Now, I'm going to clean these out. Move this. You want to get a really good sweat, a good weld. Always clean these connections with a wire brush or something comparable, because a clean joint is a better connection. I've seen people that don't clean these, and they don't even use flux. think they know it better. So this is the way I was taught in school. That's the way I've been doing it for 50 years. Okay, so then we'll take a piece of sandcloth, clean this up. Okay, then we'll remove, we're going to remove this Schrader valve here. We don't want that to burn because it's got a little nylon seal in there, and if the tube gets really hot, it'll ruin that. So that's going to go in there. This is going to go in there, and this is our suction line, which is going to go in here like this. So now we need to get some flux, which is right here. We've got our silver solder right here, a torch. Now, I don't want this to fall down when I sweat it, so I'm going to get something to prop this up. Let's see what we got here. Just like that. Put this on here so it doesn't melt that plastic top. Okay. Now we'll let that cool down. We'll put our compressor in place. A little flux. So we put a piece of aluminum in here to protect that fan blade because we're going to get our torch in there. And the next thing we're going to do is we want to force this discharge line into that joint, that swag joint. So I'm going to heat it and push it in and use this needle nose to to do that. Okay, that should conclude all the sweating. So now we'll put our compressor clips in here, put our cover on for our wires. We'll splice in the condenser fan motor, and also we need to put some silicone on the bottom of this pan so it doesn't vibrate. And then we'll start to put the cabinet back on top. So instead of splicing the condenser fan motor wires into the existing terminals here, I just took the whole wire out. We're going to put some spade terminals on the condenser fan motor wires and eliminate those wire connectors. This is a lot neater to do this. There's less wire hanging out. Okay, so got one on here on the common. Get a little help here. Of course, it would have been easier to do this if I take the relay off and put it back on. Let's do that. Okay, makes it a little easier. Okay, now we'll put the cap on it and move to the next step. Okay, so it looks like we're completed this bottom section here. Compressor's in, clips are on to hold the compressor in, cover's on, wires are hooked back in where they belong, clamped down, everything looks good. So the next segment would be, and also I clamped down this drain pan. I put some silicone down on the bottom to keep it in place so it doesn't vibrate. So the next thing we're going to do now is put the cabinet back on. Okay, so now we got the base sitting on top here. We're putting in our little connectors here, more Molex connectors here. Okay, those are in. So now we have to hook up our ground wire, which is right here, ground it to the cabinet. And then we'll bolt the cabinet on the screw holes or through here. We'll move this forward and get that bolted on, and then we can start to put it back together. Okay, so the cabinet is now reattached to the base. Okay, we've also now we have to hook up our drain heater, which is right here. This goes this way. Okay, drain heater's hooked up. The drain tube, I don't know if you can see in there. The drain tube is sitting over the drain pan, and that looks good in there. So now we'll put on our water valve. And the water valve, actually what we should probably do first is reconnect, because this water valve might be in the way of the soldering. We need to unravel this capillary tube because we have to put new insulation in here. Wrap that up there. So here's our process port. We're going to put a little clamp here to hold the cable on, like so. All right, we'll do that next. Okay. Here's the filter dryer that came with this kit. We're going to remove this stub here and solder it right into the condenser line to give us a little bit more room up here. Otherwise, it's just going to be too bulky down here. So we'll unsweat that. We'll take off this cap and remove the Schrader valve in there so it doesn't melt. And then we'll sweat it on. Then the next thing we're going to do is, oh, my tool's not working here. There it goes. You know, the difference between this filter dryer and the filter dryers I bought offshore, the difference is night and day. Now this filter is American made. It's made by, can't see, I think it's a Parker. And the filter dryers that I've been using for a while, these inferior things, I bought 1,000 of these things from a company offshore for $1 a piece. Now they work, but they're so bulky, and the moment you try to bend this tubing, which is so thin, it doesn't bend, it kinks. So I can't wait till I finish using these because I'll never buy them again. Better off buying American. All right, so let's proceed. Okay, so now we're going to sweat our filter dryer in here like that and connect our condenser line here. Filter dryer goes here, condenser here. This actually tubing goes up through the cabinet and around the perimeter of the door to keep moist condensation from forming. And then we'll solder in our suction line. And what we did was we uncoiled the capillary tube, capillary line. And whenever you put a heat exchanger in, Sub-Zero always gives you these little plastic protectors for the cap tube. So that's how I was able to fish it through the seamless insulation tubing here without cutting it or ripping it. So what I normally do, and I save these, so what I normally do is I'll just take some round object, like a paint can or something, and recoil it, like so. Now, capillary tubes are specific length and inside diameter, and that's what gives it the metering effect to supply the evaporator coil with sufficient amount of liquid refrigerant. It's all engineered at the factory, so that's why you got to be careful not to cut too much of a capillary tube off, because it may affect the refrigeration. So that looks pretty good here, and maybe one more coil like that. All right. So now, of course, that will go into our filter dryer. So let's get our sweating, brazing material and get that done. Okay. So now, put some flux on here. You notice I have that piece of aluminum. I keep that in my toolbox all the time. You know, be careful because you can melt things that way. So we've got the dryer. It's our Harris silver solder, 56% silver. Okay, this is going to go like this. I'm going to solder that first, and then we'll do the suction line. I'll do that. I'll have to move the dryer out of the way. Okay, now I can see that other joint. All right, let that cool down. Connect the capillary tube to the dryer, suction line, and we should be done with our sweating. Of course, we have to check for leaks and then do pull in evacuation before we charge it up. But there's some work to do on the inside too. So as you can see here, I pulled that insulation through. Hope you can see that up there. It's right through. So that's, I'm going to clean this up a little bit, re-caulk all the openings, and repaint around the edge and the top, and then we'll be done. So let's get moving here. Okay, so whenever you cut the capillary tube, always check and make sure it's not kink. Now, most of Sub-Zero's heat exchangers are 30 thousandths ID. You can use this gauge here. This is a 30 thousandths gauge. That fits in there nicely. So I'm going to make sure you don't have any restrictions in there. And also, when you put it in the filter dryer, don't go past this point right here, because there's a little screen in there that prevents the silica gel from coming out. Otherwise, you're going to have major problems. I usually go in about 1 inch. I like to point the dryer down so the solder doesn't roll up, or because wherever you put the heat, that's where the solder is going to go. So you see, when I solder, I bring the heat away from the joint to draw it in. Another thing you could do is put a little bend so you don't go in too far. So, for example, we'll put this in there about 1 inch, right, something like that, and then put a little bend so it doesn't go in any further. So we're going to sweat our suction line, our filter dryer, cap tube, and I think that will be done. We'll be done with the soldering. Let me cool that down. I'm going to sweat the filter dryer in. Then we'll get back to the suction line. You notice I'm putting the heat away from the joint. That's going to draw the solder into the dryer. And then when I'm finished, I usually move it forward to the tip. Let's see, I'll show you what I mean. When the copper starts to glow, it's ready. So now I'm bringing the tip. It's under pressure. All right, let me go back to the drawing board here. Okay, so what happened when that capillary tube popped out, because it's under tension, pulling it away, I should have clamped it or bent it in further. But what happened was the solder that was in the filter is now clogging the opening. So I'm going to heat it and try to clear that out using a drill bit. Okay, so that took the solder that was in there out. Let me get a light. Yeah, it's clear. I can see through there. Put a little bit more flux on there. Ooh. I need a new pair of gloves here. Good enough. Okay. Let's try to resolder that suction line. All right, that should do it. Of course, we'll check and make sure we don't have any restrictions here. We'll put some pressurized nitrogen or air or something through here to make sure it's clear. We can also do that by running it through the evaporator coil to the suction line, which will go up through the heat exchanger and come out this way and out to the filter dryer. So there's a couple of ways we can check that. We'll do that. Let's let this cool down a little bit, and we'll clean this all up and get this all positioned, and then we'll put our water valve in there, and we can start putting the cabinet back together. Okay, so now I'm going to run some nitrogen through the system, through the low side, and make sure it comes out the discharge, make sure that our cap tube is not clogged. We can also pressure check all the joints that we soldered. So we're hooked up to a nitrogen tank here. I'm using the high side gauge. See, we'll just, yep, got pressure. That's good. So basically, since this is a low side dome, the process port and the suction line are both the same. You got to use either one. So by pressurizing the process port, you're pressurizing the dome. That pressure is now running up through the heat exchanger, the suction line, through the evaporator, coming out the capillary tube right here, going in through the dryer. This is backwards, of course, but I'm just doing this to pressurize it. Normally the flow would be this way. Just want to make sure that we didn't solder that line shut. So we have some pressure in there. What we got here? Yeah, our tank's almost empty. Gonna have to get that refilled. So we'll check. Oh, we got a leak there. See it? I don't know if you can see that or not. Got that. We'll check this. Check this. Check this here. Okay, gonna resolder that suction line. Okay, so we resoldered the suction line, checked it for leaks, and got about 90 pounds of back pressure in here right now. My nitrogen tank ran dry, so I'm using my air compressor to check this. I'm going to let this sit overnight and make sure there's still pressure in the morning, just to confirm that we don't have any leaks. And then when we come back tomorrow, we can start working on the interior parts. All right, see you later. Okay, so we let this sit overnight. Pressure is exactly where it was yesterday, 90 pounds. So we're going to assume that we don't have any leaks. So we're going to drain the air out and put the vacuum pump on here for a couple hours and dry out the system, and then we'll recharge it, and then we'll finish putting the cabinet pieces together. Okay, so we're hooked up to our vacuum pump, and we're going to pull a vacuum on this, let's say, for a couple hours and dry out the system. Let that run for a while, and we'll be back. Okay, looks like we're doing okay here on the vacuum. We got as close to a 30-inch as we can. So we're going to disconnect the vacuum pump now, and we're going to, charge it up with the R12, because that's what the system takes. And once that's done, it's just a matter of putting it back together. Okay, that's the end of that stage. Okay, so this machine takes 8.5 ounces of R12. So we're going to put 8.5 ounces of R12. You're probably wondering where I got this R12 from. I've had it for many years. So you can still buy it, just have to pay a fortune for it. Just don't buy it off the internet, because a lot of people, I bought a couple of bottles of these R12 canisters years ago, and I asked the guy specifically, are the seals on them? He said yes. And when I got them, the seals were off it. So what they did was they just put hot shot in there and tried to screw me. And it took me 6 months to get my money back, but I finally did. So you have to be careful what you buy on the internet. Okay, so our tank is open. Now we're going to get 8 ounces in here. I might have to bleed this out. Bleed the air out of here. There is 8.5 ounces. Okay. Okay, so now we'll just shoot it in, start it up and shoot it in. Okay, we're going to hook this right into our low side. Still in the vacuum. Now, the tank is inverted right now because you want vapor. If you're not as a refrigeration technician, you'll know that you never put liquid into a system unless it's on the high side. Okay, so we're going to open this up, bleed out whatever air is in there, just a little bit. Right. Okay. And we'll just open it up. And we'll just let that go in there. And when that charging column is empty, we'll know we have a full charge. All right, that's it for now. I'll come back to this later and then try to get this project completed. Okay, so Here's our water valve. It's a little different than the standard the valve that came with the machine, which is this valve right here. This is the original valve. It's got a screw-on compression nut here for the line that goes up into the fill tube. But they sent us this. This is the new valve, and it has a push-on, which we're not crazy about, but that's what we're going to use. So this valve goes on like this, and then we'll put our water line into there. Here's a new hose connection. So this is going to go on like this. And compression fitting goes on here for the copper tubing. And we just have to get a rubber seal. So this valve is going to go on just like this. So go like this. And it screws into here, or at least it's supposed to, but you can see that the screw holes are different. So we're going to have to do some modification here to get this to work. As you look at the screw holes, they are the same holes. Let's try another spot here. Yeah, see, that does not line up. Not like the old one. Which lines up, because now you can see the screw holes in there. So the valve's a little different. They didn't put these things in the right spot. Obviously, you can't go that way. So we can either drill this out, drill 2 new holes in here, and so we can get that in there. No other way I can think of doing it. All right, we'll be back. Okay, so now we have a washer for here. It goes in like this. It's supposed to. Okay. So we drilled 2 more holes in there. Let's see how that's going to look. That's really close to the compressor, but it's not hitting. So let's stuff like this you can do in the shop, but when you're out in the field, you might not have the right tools to do this kind of work. Gotta drill those holes out a little bit bigger. All right, so I drilled these holes out a little bit. Let's see if that works. All right, now this gets plugged in right here. Okay, so I'm gonna have to bend this a little bit. Now normally there's a cover that goes on the back of here, which is missing. It screws into these two holes here and then down here, but it wasn't there when we picked up this machine. So we'll have to make sure that this suction line is not in the way of the hose, the fill tube hose there. All right, so that's the water valve. Now we'll start putting the other parts in. Okay, so now we're going to put this fill tube in there, and we're going to use a little bit of this putty, this waterproof stuff here, flex paste. It's just all dried up. We also put some. We'll put some in on the inside when we do the work on the inside. This for now. All right, so let's get a screwdriver. All right, so now we'll get some new water line and put new water line in there. So here's a new water line, and what I do is I use one of these cable cutters to cut these tubes. Very, very nice clean cut. Beautiful, no burrs. Now, make sure you put this little brass insert in here. So when you tighten down this clamp, it won't squash it. All right. And so this is all, there's a cover that goes on here that we're going to put on, so you make sure you allow yourself enough room. And that's going to go right into the top of there, like so. So we're going to cut this at about here. And push this down in as far as it will go. Supposed to be locked. I don't like these push-ins. To me, they're not safe. I've seen them pop out and cause major floods. All right, so that should be enough. Of course, we'll pressurize this and make sure it's okay. We might have to cut that down a little bit more. We'll see, because you don't want this plastic line to be anywhere near the heat. So we could also put a piece of insulation. I have an extra piece of insulation here. We could put this on here to protect the water line, so we'll get back to that later. All right, so pretty much that's it for the water line and the water valve. I don't know, I just don't like the way that looks. All right, so that's the back. Let's move to the front. All right, so I decided to put this piece of insulation I had sitting around here on top of that, because also it will cushion that suction line from rubbing against the line. This is going to go like this, so that will protect the water line from the heat of the compressor. Also, while I got this apart, I will put some putty, some Flex Seal on that right there, cover that hole, seal that off. The stuff dries out, so you can see it's that tube, that container has to be sealed airtight, otherwise stuff just dries out. All right, I think that's going to be enough. Let's just dress it up a little bit here. All right, we'll let that dry. That'll create a nice seal, airtight. All right. Now, I consider this done for now.